we only focus on the poverty of physical realities. Roti, kapda, makan. Right. That is only considered as a poverty. But poverty does not stop there. There is a physical poverty, there is a vital poverty, there is a social poverty, there is an intellectual poverty, and there is a spiritual poverty. Poverty in Annamaya Kosha, poverty in Pranamaya Kosha, poverty in Manomaya Kosha. It is very difficult for a poor person to have a loving relationship with his family. We see many times stories when the farmer makes great loss in his farming business. What do? There is a conflict. The entire family chooses to commit suicide. Or there are complete struggle, beating the wives, beating the children. The man is in depression and his depression is coming out in the family members. Therefore, the social structure is broken. When the social structure is broken, then your understanding also completely breaks down. People start believing that life is so miserable. Nobody is there to help you. Because our experience, unfortunately, becomes our wisdom. When we make our experience into our knowledge bank and talk that to others, there is nothing greater destructive than that. Wisdom may come from pain, but we have to go beyond the pain. I remember talking to this lady who went through a lot of pain. Sindhuttai Sakpa. She was telling Radhanath Swami that, where does pain? He said, Vedana. Pain is called as Vedana. In that very Vedana, there is also Veda. Vedana mein Ved hai. What is there? Vedana mein Ved hai. But she chose that path. So therefore this poverty, when we are integrated in poverty, from physical to spiritual, in the early 1947 after the independence, unfortunately, most of the modern Indian leaders, they chose the path of atheism, more aggressive atheism than the Western model. And part of that atheism, in the Western world atheism was there, but atheism did not make them appreciate some other culture. They thought we have to discover our own understanding. We'll study that also. But what happened with India, we started believing everything is bad about Bharat. I remember listening to one economist. He said what has happened in Indian mind is, when there is a problem with American system, when there is a problem in American family, when there is a problem in European family, what do they say? They have a problem. They say they have a problem, they need to fix. But when it comes to Bharat, what do we say? Bharat is a problem. Just say the mindset. Why can't we say Bharat में समस्या है? Why do we say Bharat ही समस्या है? Right? Why? Because there is such a deep poverty, and that poverty gives rise to shamelessness, and that shamelessness gives rise to limitless violence. And once we become violent, then the slavery becomes our actual reality. Then we become mental slave, then we become intellectual slave, then we become spiritually slave. On every aspect the slavery becomes our reality. Right? So therefore today we will try to understand how to build a nation or a community. There are two principles. Basically you can sum up in two principles. One is that education and becoming resourceful. It does not matter how much good knowledge you have.
If you do not have the power, nobody takes you seriously. Please understand this. Knowledge without power is a museum piece. The best example is in the assembly of Asat Sabha. Go back to 5000 years ago. Draupadi was being disrobed. Right. And unfortunately, nobody stood up for her. Nobody, including her husbands. They felt that we have become slave of Duryodhana. They couldn't stand up. And then the great Bhishmacharya, they are called as Acharyas. Bhishmacharya, Dronacharya, Kripacharya, three Acharyas were there, learned in all kinds of knowledge. A queen, the wife of the Pandavas, the Kula Vadhu of the Gurukul, a woman who is wanting for protection, she is calling for protection, nobody came to protect her. There was two people who were screaming at them, Vidura and Vikarna. Vikarna was the brother of Duryodhana and Vidura was the Mahamantri of the entire Kuru race. He was shouting, screaming, speaking the reality. But his voice was like the call by a small baby in the forest, which is called as Aranyarodhana. Aranyarodhana, in the wilderness, when you call out, nobody listens to you. Nobody cared for Vidur. They shut him down. And Draupadi goes to Bhishma Dev. Draupadi goes to Bhishma Dev and Bhishma Dev had tears in his eyes. He is crying tears. And she asked this very relevant question to Bhishma Dev. She said, my dear grandsire, who has dharma? Dharma kisi ke haath mein? Who has the dharma? And you know what Bhishmacharya gave the answer? Please reflect and contemplate on this. Bhishma Dev gave a very, very practical answer. Very practical answer. You cannot beat this answer in a real world. There is a philosophical world, that is a different thing. But in the real world, this is given by Bhishma Dev. Contemplate, think about it. Bhishma said, my dear Draupadi, I am very sorry to say this. She said, whoever has a power, they decide what is dharma. Open the pages of the Mahabharata. When I read this, I was shocked to hear this. She is saying, whoever has the power, they decide dharma. And my dear Draupadi, unfortunately, the power is in the hand of Duryodhana, Dushasan, Karna and Shakuni. And we are forced to submit to their understanding of dharma. What do you think Krishna had to do with the Pandavas? What did Krishna do to the Pandavas? Up until now, Pandavas were sweet people. The Pandavas were submissive people. The Pandavas were purely dharmic people. And this story changed the course of their activities. They continued to remain what they were. We discussed this last few days. They continued to remain dharmic people, but they realized we need to be resourceful also. We need to be powerful also. We need to be educated also. Duryodhana was nasty and powerful. Can you find someone is nasty and powerful just because you are good, just because you are dharmic? Doesn't work like that. There is a beggar who is very dharmic, and there is a landlord, rich man who is extremely abusive. Can a beggar fight him? the beggar may feel that ultimately there is God who will give us justice. Then you have to wait. The principle of karma will take care of that wealthy person. But the point what the scriptures are teaching us, why wait so long and bring God into picture when He has given you resources to fight yourself? Krishna facilitated the growth of the Pandavas. And when the resources came and they were educated, even though they had less army, their confidence became so great when Arjuna came to Krishna. Don't take them only as a story. These are the realities of the life. Arjuna had resources. He had powerful weapons. And he had a wisdom to know when to apply those weapons. And then what happened? Arjuna told Krishna, Krishna, I don't want the resources, I want you. Because I have the resources. I want relationship. So Arjuna was able to reconcile between the relationship and the resources. And it became a powerful energy. And that powerful energy made the Kauravas have a sleepless night. Duryodhana, Dhritarashtra, everybody had a sleepless night. And Arjuna became a concentrated force. In one day alone, now these are not fantastic stories, these are the realities. If you study the history of the great kings like Shivaji Maharaj, some of his conquest, 300 soldiers fighting 6,000 people. 300 soldiers, 300 is okay, fighting 3,000 to 600 soldiers. And they had the power to stop the Vijapur Sena capturing Shivaji. Because at the power, they had resources, but the power and resources was connected to that divine energy. 1948 battle, 700, the soldiers, Pakistan army, when there was kind of, India, they were thinking that India has to pay this, India has to do this, they started creating a trouble. And suddenly one night they sent 700 soldiers. These were Pathan and these were African, very powerful looking soldiers. 700 soldiers came. And the area where they came, if you go to Srinagar, when you get down from the airport, there is a statue of one major. So this person where he was guarding, he had only 30 to 40 soldiers. And he wrote, he sent a signal to the main camp asking that please send us more attachment, more soldiers. He said till the more help comes to us, we will guard our borders. And you know what happened? When the extra soldiers came eventually, all the 30, 40, 50, whatever, very less number, were all brutally murdered. They were all killed. But not before killing 700 Pakistani soldiers. It's one of the great battles. And that person who received the Paramveer Chakra, he was dead. His name is Somnath Sharma. They couldn't even recognize him. There was no way you could recognize him. One of his friend who had come as the extra, help, he said, I will recognize him. And how did he recognize him? He went around and he put his hand in the pocket of all the soldiers. It was all full of blood. And then at one place he removed a small Bhagavad Gita. He said, this is Somnath Sharma. His every aspect, the physical to spiritual aspect was very integrated. And eventually this very Somnath Sharma's brother became India's army chief. So therefore, it's a very interesting principle. What is it? You need to have dharma and you also need to have artha. Artha denotes resources. So when these two are combined, then people start taking you seriously. Otherwise, nobody takes anybody seriously unless there is a power and resources. This is the story of Mahabharata. This is the story of Ramayana also. And this is everybody's story. Is everybody's story. So therefore, what does Krishna begin, and how do you become resourceful? The way to become resourceful happens through education. Right. Again, if you study carefully, Shivaji Maharaj's teachers, they gave him knowledge. They gave him knowledge, and through the knowledge of Mahabharata and Ramayana, they were not simply stories. No, I am looking for a good research. How strategically Shivaji Maharaj was influenced by these scriptures. And there are so many connection to the strategies in the Mahabharata and his strategy in the battlefield. The great connection is there, right? So it all begins with education. Therefore, Krishna explains, Nahi jnanena sadrisham pavitram iha vidyate tat swayam yoga samsiddhim kalinatmani vindati. And every word what Krishna speaks in the Bhagavad Gita, because Bhagavad Gita is book of life, right? This is the only book which is called as Dharma Shastra, is not spoken in the temple, it is not spoken in the ashram, it is not spoken in the Gurukul, it is not spoken in the Patashala, it is not spoken in the Vidyalaya, it is not spoken at the time of death. Now what we have made with Bhagavad Gita, if somebody is dying, people go and read Bhagavad Gita to a dying person, that is good. But Bhagavad Gita was spoken to a person who was dead in his spirit. His spirit was lost. He was confused. He was running away from the life. He was running away from the duty. Then Krishna spoke the knowledge of Bhagavad Gita to Arjuna. And therefore here Krishna is saying that there is nothing so sublime and pure as transcendental knowledge. And what is it? Such knowledge is the mature fruit of mysticism. And one who takes this knowledge, what does it do? He enjoys the transcendence. So therefore, it becomes very important for us to understand what education has done to India and what education has done to India. You may say I am repeating the same statement. I will come back to you. As I said, I am very much connected to education, even though I am not very highly educated, but somehow there is a drive to understand education, the whole concept of education. I was attending a lecture on the concept of education. This man written a very beautiful book called as Matter of Quality, Pawan Gupta ji. And in his book, I read his book first. He made a very interesting point. He said education is important, but unfortunately it is better to be uneducated and then to be educated wrongly. What is it? It is better to be uneducated instead of being educated wrongly. And then that's how he wrote this very understanding of right education is very important. And without that right education, can you imagine? Recently, Dr. Subhash Salunke, he used to be the director of Maharashtra Health Services, then he joined other big organization. He used to regularly visit here. I read one of his articles about this COVID-19 issue. there are hundreds and thousands of empty seats in the government hospitals need to be filled. There are no doctors, even though there are many medical colleges. Again, I was reading another article that there are a lot of soldiers in Indian army wanting to join, but there are so many less number of army officers joining. Educated young people, they claim to be very adventurous than previous generation. अरे पिछले जन्म के लोग इतने adventurous नहीं थे, अपने घर पे ही बैठे रहते थे. We were the most adventurous. They claim to be adventurous. Where is their adventure? Their adventure is on the cricket ground, their adventure is in the football ground, their adventure is in the bungee jumping, their adventure is, skydiving. These are all professional adventure. But life is not synonymous to professional adventure. There are literally thousands of empty posts. It is not that people don't come to be officers, but they don't have the disposition for becoming officers. I always tell this story. I was speaking to one very interesting Air Force officer. He's an Air Commodore, he's a friend of one of our devotee, amazing personality. And he was telling us, I asked him, sir, you are a fighter pilot. He fought the Kargil war also. I said, you are a fighter pilot. We read this article, less number of people coming. Is it true? He said, you know what? He said, for joining National Defence Academy course, we receive more than 100,000 people. And especially in regards to being a fighter pilot, we always have 20, 30, 40, 50, whatever, 70,000 people joining, wanting to join. Every year, India requires 30 fighter pilots. How many wants to be? 70,000. But how many we take sometime? He said we only take 17, 18, 20, 22. I said, why sir, why can't you take 70,000 people are willing to lay down their life? There is a spirit, there is enthusiasm. Why can't you take? He said, I understand. He said, I understand. He said, they have the inspiration, but they do not have a disposition. No, they have to be having that character, that disposition has to be there. They fail in the examination during the disposition test. And the Air Force cannot afford to take unqualified people. Therefore, the qualification has to be there in the fire from the beginning only. And what happened? This fire was destroyed by bad kind of education. And when this happened, there is a great compilation of the archives. It was there in the British archives. There was a personality called as Dharmapal. He married a British woman, felt very fortunate. Of course, she was a very good wife. He had to go back to London to stay there. And he wanted to understand, after going to London, he wanted to understand about India. Happened about many people like that. Many people it happened like that. Yesterday one young boy, I know him since so many years, Arjun, he wrote about his father is an American, his mother was in London. But I have seen, my God, he wrote a letter about fire, about understanding Bharatiyata, studying about Bharatiyata, from his childhood experience some kind of, racial comments, right? So that became a fire to understand. Arvind Ghosh, one of the great philosopher, his father was such a big landlord. As the child was born, he sent him to London, making it very clear that our child should not hear even a word of Bengali. He should be raised as a pure British breed. Can you imagine? That kind of colonization had happened. Prabhupada talks about Motilal Nehru. No, he hated Indian medicine. This is what Prabhupada writes. He writes more about, the esteemed Prime Minister and his family. Right. So then what happened was, fortunately, Arvind Ghosh being in America, in London, he came in touch with a British teacher. She gave a connection to his root culture. And he came back to India. He became one of the strong freedom fighter, became a great philosopher. Right, wrote many books. No, so the fire for some people came about, but most people the fire was lost because a wrong kind of education was given. So this person Dharmapal, when he came to London, for 17 years he was there, he went into British archives and collected so many information about how Britishers collected all the statistics about what kind of education system India had. Now this we have to give them full credit. What is that? The ability to keep tracks of everything. There is a credit for it, and why Indians don't do, that's a different subject. Right. So he went and studied this. Now this is the survey conducted in 1820. Just see this, there are Ganjam, Vishakhapattanam, Rajamundry, Muslipatam, Guntur, Nellore, Bellary, and see the number of children, number of schools you see. There were 255 schools in Ganjam, 900 and more so schools in Vishakhapattanam, Rajamundry more than 291 or 279 schools, Muslipatam 480, and how many students? Brahmin scholar students 800, right. Vaishya student 243, and then Shudra student 1001. And what do you hear? That the Shudras were not allowed to come to school. And just see, there were 2 female students also in Ganjam district. All others different category. Vishakhapattanam, see the number, 914 schools. How many Brahmins? 4448. And how many female? 99 female. So similarly, Vaishya children, and just see Shudra children, 1000 children studying, male, and 73 girls. Just go on seeing this, how many children were studying in the school. This is not made up story from some Hindu groups. It is there in the British archives, right? Next one, he talks about Indic education. Tirunelveli, Coimbatore, Canara, Malabar, Srirangapattanam, Madras, and the charity to do private tuition. How many number of schools? Tirunelveli 607 school, 2000 Brahmin student, 2589 Shudra students. I think all the Kshatriyas were playing cricket match. All the royalty went doing like that. Just see, this is what he gives the figure, and then you can understand the difference. The Muslim student and the Hindu student, that number is also given. Again the same thing, Muslim and Hindu students, how many students were studying? 8579, right, total student. Mohammedan student 769, Hindu student 9258 in Tirunelveli. And what do they write in this very book? He says, read this, I'll read this. Population in Madras Presidency in 1823 was estimated at how much? It's about 12 lakh, 85,941. While the population in England was almost 900,054, 9,54,000 almost. And read this conclusion. What does he say? number of those attending various types of schools, charities, Sunday circulating in England were all in the neighborhood of around 75,000, as compared to at least double of this number within the Madras Presidency. So therefore, what do they say? He says, a cultivator or petty dealer who is not competent to keep his own accounts with a degree of accuracy, in my opinion, beyond what we meet with amongst the lower orders in our own country. This is the British Bombay Presidency. Who is speaking this? Prendergast is speaking this. And what does he say? He says, bankers keep their books with a degree of ease, consciousness and clearness I rather think fully equal to those of any British merchants. And what do our elitists think? Oh, we never got to study, we were not educated. Till 1820 the education was happening. I gave the example of a barber. I gave the example of other people also knowing more than one work. Right, the cobbler, the kind of shoes they used to make, the saris in South India, the saris in Bengal, the kind of quality they used to make, you could never match that. So therefore, in 1820, then the letter written by Macaulay makes more sense when you have these figures. Then what we did? Rather than integrating education, whenever we talk about, when we talk about education, it is not about religious education. It is not about religious education, but it is the education of what? Integrated education. Very interesting principle. Unlike the faith school started by the Abrahamic religion, the Abrahamic people started the faith schools, but the Gurukul systems were connected to dharma centric. What is the difference? The difference is very big. In the Abrahamic faith, you teach them pure faith. In the dharmic scripture, in dharmic school, you help children to discover their nature. The child would come to that school based upon his own or her faith. That was never disturbed. That was their private affair. That was their private affair. What they were learning in schools? They were learning discovering their nature. Apne swadharma, understanding their nature. Helping the children to act according to nature. I was talking to one very traditional Ayurvedic doctor from Kerala, and he explained how the teacher would start discovering the tendencies of his own children and the neighboring children, and then few more children. The Gurukuls were very spontaneous, and the children would stay there whole day. How do you know? He said, we would never teach. If you are an Ayurvedic doctor, where will that Ayurvedic doctor take him? He will take him to the forest. He will take him to the medicine making place. He said, the children would ask questions. Ki Vaidya Maharaj, why are you picking these leaves? Next question, what are these leaves for? How these leaves are different from these leaves? He said the difference between education what is given now and education given then, now the teachers give you question and the students have to answer. And previously the teacher would bring out the questioning ability in the children, and the teacher were forced to give the answer to the student. I am not saying that there were no exams, but the principle is helping the child to discover. Right. Once they would discover their innate character, then they would facilitate, help them to develop their nature. Right. When Krishna was studying in Sandipani Muni's ashram, Sudama was there and Krishna was there. In the Vishnu Purana, there is an interesting story. Which story we heard? The story connected to Lord Buddha. One of his brother or friend, he shot a bird, the bird fell down, and he argued with him, how can you kill the bird? They went to the teacher, and what did the teacher say? Teacher said, yes, one who gives life is superior to those who take life. So basically in this story, the protector was condemned and the compassionate person was glorified. Very important. But there is a similar story in the Puranas. Krishna and Sudama. No, some bird was being chased, and this bird almost came asking shelter from Krishna. Krishna took his bow and he attacked the bird which was trying to prey on this small bird, and the bird fell down, and Sudama immediately ran there chastising Krishna, how could you do this? You cannot kill like this, it is their life. And Krishna said, look, that came asking shelter from me, it is my responsibility. He said, no, you can't do like this. Eventually they came to Sandipani Muni, and their question was, who is more important, a Brahmana who is compassionate in giving life, or a Kshatriya who is giving protection? While giving protection he has to kill. Who is better? And what is the answer given by Sandipani Muni? A brilliant answer, and this is what we need to hear. Sandipani Muni told, Sudama, you are correct from your perspective. As an intellectual, as a Brahmana, as a compassionate, it is your responsibility. And he said, Krishna is a Kshatriya. His responsibility is to be courageous. And therefore Kshatriyas would go to the forest to hunt. Why would they go to the hunt? If you don't know how to punish people, how will you punish people? So the practice has to be there. And then the school would teach them, what do they learn? They would help them to discover their nature, help them to act according to their nature, give them all the skill in that nature. And while teaching that skill to them, they would also teach them that why are you using this knowledge? This knowledge has to be used for right reason. There is a Daivi varnasrama, there is Asuri varnasrama. Duryodhana practiced Asuri varnashram. In fact, he was more skillful than Bhima in mace fighting. But the purpose of mace fighting was to exploit others. Right. So this question was always there. The Pandavas and the Kauravas studied in the same Gurukul, right? This question many people have asked. When they studied in the same Gurukul under Dronacharya, why Yudhishthira Maharaj became so saintly and why Duryodhana became so nasty? Why Bhima became so innocent and lover of people, and why Dushasan became so like that? Karna studied in the same Gurukul, never agree. Whether it is, we love the B.R. Chopra's Mahabharat, we all grew up hearing to that. But there are certain flaws in regards to Karna not learning under Dronacharya. In my book Karna on Trial, 3 places it is given. Narad Muni speaking this, Karna himself speaking to Dronacharya. Why did he go to get the Brahmastra? He was also studying under Dronacharya only. So the question is raised, right? Why did not they change? My God, there is an answer in the Mahabharata. Dronacharya, he spoke to, if I am not wrong, he spoke to Sanjay or Vidura. He said, let Dronacharya only teach them the skill but not samskaras. So Duryodhana cultivated the nasty samskaras along the skill, but he was not changed by Dronacharya. These are the verses in the Mahabharata. Because Dronacharya was a tuition teacher. His goal was not to see whether the child is smoking, the child is taking drugs, the child has doing all the nasty. As long as I teach him how to get 98%, what the child makes is none of my business. No? So therefore understand this. The education along with the proper skill would also give them proper understanding of Loka Sangraha, Swadharma and Loka Sangraha. You are learning this so that you can distribute this to others. Swadhyaya, Swadhyaya and Loka Sangraha. Apne ko samjho, Swadhyaya, and then eventually help others discover. There is Swartha and there is Niswartha. There is Swa and there was also Sarva. Mere liye aur sabke liye. And what was the purpose of this education system? The purpose of this education system was creating the Brahmarsis and creating the Rajarsis. And what is this concept of Brahmarsi and Rajarsi? The concept of Brahmarsi and Rajarsi is simple. It is trying to be king without, means active, and sage within. If there is a king without and sage within, then there is hardly any selfishness. Self-preservation will be there, but self-obsession will never happen. And whenever those kings, royalties became self-indulgence, they became obsessed. They would see people dying but did not matter to them. Duryodhana is saying it to Dronacharya in the first chapter. Madarte tektva jivita, all these people are willing to die for me. Are you willing to die for others? Krishna told Arjuna, Krishna told Daruka, he said, you know what, Arjun? This Arjuna will cut off his flesh and he will die for me. That is what, only this kind of talking is a jealous God. But our God is not jealous God. What did Krishna say? He said, Daruka, just like Arjuna gives his flesh for me, I will give my flesh to him. No, I will die for Arjuna and Arjuna will die for me. Therefore, in relationship, it is not one way. And the education taught them this. And therefore, I said in the very first day, the Bharatiya Sanskriti is not the Sanskriti to dominate. At the same time, Bharatiya Sanskriti is not the Sanskriti of being apologetic. It is not defensive, but it is not offensive. But it has to be assertive. It is not to be offensive, it is not to be defensive, but there has to be assertiveness. One has to have the courage. Wherever the wrong has happened, we have the power to explain these where the wrong did happen in our society. But at the same time, these are the realities what our scriptures talk about, our people practice. What happens? The liberals, the leftists, the evangelic people, they slander the Bharatiya culture to such an extent. They don't want to see any good there. And unfortunately, the traditionalists, what they do? They don't want to see any fault here. They have to make their kings, they have to make their teachers as completely flawless. Narayani hai mere Raja. Study Shivaji Maharaj. What kind of assembly he had, what kind of strategy he was doing based upon the advice given by in the Mahabharata. Our Vidura had the courage to chastise not only Dhritarashtra, he could chastise the Yudhishthira Maharaj also. Right. The Brahmana could come out in the palace of Dwarka, and it is not easy to deal with the North Indian Dwarkavasis. They are fiery people, Yadavas. But one thing they were very clear, if somebody would give them critical analysis, they had the courage to accept. It is one thing, flattery is also very painful. It's bogus, it's superficial. Right. But critical thinking, hearing critical thinking requires greatest of the courage. Sumantara, chariot driver, has the courage to blast Kaikeyi in the presence of her dear husband, and Kaikeyi could not do anything. So therefore it's a very interesting principle of, like harmonizing modernity and traditionalism. It's a different subject matter only. So the purpose of education was this: to make a critical thinker, to be a contributor. And is it there in the scripture? Yes. In the Manu Samhita, no, at some point of time we will also discuss the discovery of great freedom in the Manu Samhita. The subject of Manu Samhita would be freedom given by Manu to every living entity, but you have to understand it carefully, not remove one isolated verses. And I will give you this very interesting concept, and I will say something here. People slander Manu for being anti-women. People slander Manu for being pro-Brahmanas. But how many people have actually read Manu Samhita? There are more verses Manu speaks condemning the Brahmanas rather than condemning women, condemning the Shudras. There are more verses. There are more verses chastising the kings compared to speaking ill about women. Why does he do that? Why does he write what he has written? You have to study carefully what Manu is trying to say. Right. That very Manu, no, I have seen some of the book written by some scholars. They say, oh, there is such a conflict in Manu. One places he glorifies women, other places he condemns women. Nothing, no glorification, no condemnation. He talks a very interesting principle. We will not speak that here. But one thing I want to share. What Manu says, just hear this, but those who are listening, do not misunderstand, do not take it wrongly. Manu says, if the girl does not get a man in her life at the right time, and what is the right time? Everybody understand what is the right time. He said, she does not get that, she has the right to run and find her own husband. Can you imagine this? This is there in the Manu Samhita. Forget in the Manu Samhita. In the Mahabharata, the great Brahmachari Bhishma Dev speaking it to great Yudhishthira Maharaj. Both are extremely traditionalist, submissive to the vows of their superiors. They took so much of suffering for themselves, being submissive to their superiors, even though their superiors were sometimes misusing their submission. Read that. And that very Bhishma Dev, when he is lying on the bed of arrows, what does he say? He says, if the family members do not provide the girl at the right time her biological need in the form of a husband, so they get a great sin. वो पाप के भागीदार बनते हैं. ये शास्त्र के श्लोक है. Right? So what is the problem? The problem with us is we only use those verses which appeal to us. We only use those verses which appeal to us, and then consciously neglect what does not appeal to us. And therefore we create a conflict between the Shastras. But Shastras are very beautifully integrated. Beautifully integrated. And what does Manu say? Just he has the guts to say this. These are the last chapter of Manu Samhita. I'll give you an essence. What he says that whatever I have written and whatever I have not written, there are certain applications which have become redundant. The commentary is not here, but I have heard from many wonderful Vedic scholars But if you read these verses, you will understand the last chapter of the Manu Samhita. Now, better than reading in English. If I don't know Sanskrit, read the original Hindi, Kannada, Tamil, English, because the English language, when it is not translated properly, it changes the whole meaning. So, what is the essence of this? The essence of this is that when it is not functionable, because of the changing times, the application will change. And because the application will change, then Manu says a group of people should come together, responsible, well educated, studied the Vedas properly, experienced people, they should come together and create an amendment to his very book. It's not a frozen book. There is a facility for creating new Samhita. For your information, neither Shivaji nor Rana Pratap nor Krishnadeva Roy ever used Manu Samhita in ditto as it is and applied in their state. They wrote their own law book. Of course, getting many inspiration from other Dharma Shastras in regards to different kinds of behavioral law, relationship law, marriage law, property law, what is considered as good, what is considered as bad. And he himself is saying this, right? He himself is saying that. And how do you know? We can see this in all these verses in the last chapter. And to prove this, Chanakya Pandit in Artha Shastra, I read little bit. The followers of Parashar disagree with the above. Vishalaksha was the predecessor teacher giving laws to human society. These are not spiritual principle, they are talking about application principle. Right. Sometimes parents come and tell, our children are watching too much of television. When we were growing, we would not watch the television. But such a wrong logic, because when you were not watching television, because there was no television during your time, no, that law will not apply now. When in our time there were hundreds of children to play and there was a ground also to play. Now the children are hooked to video game. I talk to so many children, what do you like? Video games or going in the field? I would say out of 10 children, 8 would say I want to be in the field. But there is no field, there are no friends, there are no children other than in the school. And most of the school nowadays, where do they have? They have a long building and no place for play. So therefore, the disagreement is not out of arrogance. Sometime a group of society gets stuck to something which is not working. But they say, no, this is what has been given to us, it has to be applied as it is. We have to be loyal. But loyal at what cost? Loyal at not enlightening the new generation of people. Right, read that very carefully. The followers of Parashar disagree with above. And then eventually what does Chanakya do? Chanakya says he disagrees, about expecting what kind of minister. This is in the Artha Shastra. And therefore, when a society is critically thinking through the process of education, what does it do? It gives rise to independently being thoughtful. It gives a responsible thinking. When the constitution was formed, in India, unfortunately, you can blaspheme Mahabharata, you can blaspheme Ramayana, you can blaspheme Upanishad. And if you speak something about constitution critically, in this clause, this should be amendment. What do they say? Arey, constitution khatre mein, constitution khatre mein. Right. How many people have actually read the constitution? How many people have the history while forming the constitution? Let me read one, like I was talking about false narrative. This was address given by Vijay Lakshmi. Does it raise some kind of alarm in your brain? If not, Study who was Vijay Lakshmi. And she was questioned by Dr. H.V. Kamath. Why did he question? This lady came to United Nations General Assembly in Paris, and she spoke there. And what did she speak? She said, India, we have borrowed from France their slogan of liberty, equality and fraternity. We have taken from England and America. But what she did not do? She did not mention what we had borrowed from our own political and historical past, our long and checkered history of which we are so proud of. Nothing she took, nothing she spoke about. When Max Muller, who was so conscious of converting every Hindus to Christianity, Macaulay, who was so conscious of changing, and the problem was they appreciated the knowledge of India, but because of their blind Christian faith, they wanted to convert. The critical thinking was covered by the faith. If you are not Christian, then you must not be a good person. Right? That was the sad understanding. And another person, part of the Constitution Board, this is what he spoke about the village. Village survived through all charging circumstances but has no value. On a very low, on a selfish level, these village republics have been held as a ruination of India. So this person, unfortunately, very great personality, we respect him so much. He said he had a bad experience of villages in his own life. So what did he say? They are ruination of India. Those who condemn provincialism and communalism should come forward as champions of the village. A village is a sink of localism, a den of ignorance, a narrow-mindedness and communalism. The draft constitution has discarded the village and adopted the individual as a unit. Right. Now let us see how much revenue this village gave us. There is a famous author, Vaidyanathan, Dr. Vaidyanathan. He retired as the professor in IIM Bangalore. And statistically he proves in this book called as India Unink. And what does he say? The unincorporated sector in India contributes about 45% of the national income, which by far surpasses the corporate sector contribution of around 15%. And yet its contribution remains unacknowledged. Also, it is important to note that the estimates of their sector in manufacturing and service need to be made more accurate. But where do we invest? Where is our energy invested? We are investing our energy in making MBAs. One very interesting fact somebody said, one farmer sold his farmland wanting to make his son MBA. The son became an MBA, started earning money. Eventually the land price went to such an extent that very land which he had sold, if he had maintained that land, he would have actually had crores of rupees, which his son could never earn by being an MBA and earning that much of money. That's a tragedy, right? That's a tragedy. And just see, and nobody knows this. See this. How much he is talking about? Organized sector. Please, if you are interested in economics, read this book. Government, how much? Domestic product 17%, private 12%. In 1980, unorganized agriculture 38%. Now this is the reduced number. This is a reduced number because more people used to work in the farmland. Other activities 31%. So therefore villages are consistently producing a large amount of revenue. One of the greatest thing has happened because of the COVID, because in this world everything has its positive side and its negative side. What is the positive side? I was talking to some villagers. Certainly the supply chain has been disturbed, but in the villagers, all the migrant workers from the city, they have gone back to the village. Now village will have at least for next 6 months to 1 year, hopefully for some more time, they will have their own local people coming into the field, working in the agricultural field. The production of India is going to grow great at least for next 1 year. Why? Because they will stay in their village. It is the responsibility of the people. Where do we invest our energy? Even those who want to make money, be connected to the villager, not with the mood of exploitation, but working in cooperation. We did not took them seriously. In our school, if some children, farmers' children would not study mathematics properly, but they knew the art of mathematics properly, they knew real mathematics, but they were condemned because they would not write on the paper. And what they would say, अरे भैंस चराने के लिए जाओगे क्या, दना कायले खोकते हैं. This was the word they would always hear. So what impetus they would have to continue to work in the field, right? And this Pawan Gupta ji writes in his book, when he started these schools, he started the regular school in Uttarakhand, and after 2-3 years when they did a survey, what did they hear? The parents of the rural would tell their teachers, sir, what have you done? हमारे बच्चों को आपने बर्बाद कर दिया. He was shocked. And the suburban children, their parents said, आपने हमारे बच्चों को बिगाड़ दिया. You are spoiled. You are destroyed and you are spoiled. You are destroyed and you are spoiled. And then he realized what happened was, when these children started coming to school, the uniform is one of the worst crime. Because when a villager wears a uniform, what do we say? Clean hona chahiye kapda. We consider the soil of the farmer to be dirty, and the pollution of the city with the perfume over their body we consider as very refined. Just see how much brain has been disturbed. And he writes this. And because the children were criticized, when they would go back to their homes in the village, they would not go and touch the cow dung. They would not hold the plough in their hands. And therefore Gandhiji mentioned in 1920s, he said this education system is separating the children from the parents. The children are feeling shy to interact with their parents. Rather than integrating the parents, they wanted their children to be educated, at the same time rooted to their own traditional business system. We will discuss that also, farming. So therefore education without this, what happened? Created a big trouble. And very interesting. Now this is a most interesting principle for how nation grows. Please hear it again and again. Read Arthashastra, read in the Mahabharata. The growth of a person, which growth? The spiritual growth, the family growth, and the economical growth, and the growth of vital energy is not the responsibility of the state. Don't expect when a king provides you grain, when a government provides you grain rather than the farmer, that is a sickly civilization, has to collapse. Has to collapse. It creates this limitless what? Corruption. Read this. Again, this is from the same book. He says that we should remember that the government is not the solution, rather it is the problem. Hence the government should drastically reduce or remove taxes and regulations and encourage philanthropy for productive purposes. And that is what our kings were doing. I remember talking to when Arvind Mafatlal, he passed away in Chitrakoot. and there was a memorial in Chitrakoot, and one of his confidant in Chitrakoot, right, he was telling in 1970s when Morarji Desai became Prime Minister, he came there to visit to see what they have done. No, we will discuss that point. Just see, the family centered philanthropy, the community centered philanthropy is much more impacting than the government controlled philanthropy, because in government the babus are sitting. There are too many restrictions, too many challenges, too many difficulties. Some are inspired, many are not inspired. We are not saying everybody is bad, but there are some inspired people, but their inspiration turns into perspiration because many do not believe in the same idea what they have. When Morarji Desai came there, and he was shocked to see, and this Arvind Mafatlal along with one of his inspirer, Manibhai Desai, they started this organization as called as BIF. They started this organization called as Sadguru Seva Trust. There are many such people, the Birlas and other big industrialists. So they worked. How did they work? They adopted hundreds and thousands of families. But these stories don't come, right? Because they don't score 100 in 20 ball, 40 ball. This is what we believe. This is what our hero. This is our God. Now again I said, we are not against the sports. We are not against the sports people. They are also nice. Many are beautiful human beings. But our madness, the kind of worshipable attitude we have developed, right? We don't know. You go and ask anybody who knows Somnath Sharma. I guarantee you, even some of our politicians will not know. But everybody knows who is Katrina Kaif. Even I know. What a unfortunate reality. And who gives them the fame? Right? Who gives them the fame? So these organizations, when Morarji Desai came there, I heard this person said, he was very fascinated. And Morarji Desai asked him, how you did this? He said, I'll tell you how I did it, but you can also do it. He said you empower 500 zones in India and give each zone to those people who have the guts, who have the fire to develop in India. Empower people, educate them properly, empower them properly. He said, if you do that, but then he said you will not do it because you are a politician. If this 500 groups empower the India, then where is the job for you? You will not have a job. So therefore bear this in mind. As much as a good politician you have, that much we become more and more lazy. The job of a good politician, which I would say our Prime Minister, they have that background coming from certain culture. The concept of empowerment is there. But what is the expectation of people? The expectation of people is that he needs to do everything. He has to become a Bahubali. Everything has to be changed. No, economically, that's not his responsibility. Socially, it is not his responsibility. And therefore, he explains that the social capital in the form of community and family efforts could go a long way in ameliorating problems related to unemployment rather than the government taxing its citizen and spending on it, since on both counts there will be a huge own account collection by its employees. Own account means bribe. Entitlement based economy creates only bribe entitlement for the babus. And therefore better to think in terms of creating productive employment. Study about these things if you are listening to these talks. How to create. We have become people of hero worshippers. And which kind of heroes we worship? We worship synthetic heroes. We clap. They are entertainers. They are not transformation of civilization. They will not transform civilization. They will only entertain. Look for such good people. Join your hands with them. assist them, then what will happen? You can actually create Chandraguptas, you can actually create Shivaji Maharaj, you could become one. No, therefore God, another very important principle to understand, according to Vedic scripture, the resources in this world are so plenty, then we can live a prosperous life. With few, naturally because of the land of duality, there will be some poor people. But the poverty has increased much more than 200 years ago. Different kind of poverty is there. Starvation is there, water problem is there, mental problem is there. Why this is happening? Because our focus is elsewhere. Our understanding is also screwed up. No, sometimes those who are practicing spirituality, they require an endorsement from somebody else to become compassionate and sensitive. Is it recommended in our scripture to be mundanely charitable? If you see somebody starving, if somebody is thirsty, do you have to ask somebody to give them water? It has to come naturally, automatically. So therefore, we see this same parallel is applicable in the Western world also. Republics and conservatives are opposed to public welfare programs. Study there very carefully. What do? They continue the cycle of poverty. This was one American gave me this statistics. 47% of all Americans do not pay income tax, while leftists want to tax upper middle class 70%. Top 10% make money but also pay for 82% of all social welfare programs. Leftists are pro poverty by continuing the cycle of poverty. It's a very interesting phenomena. 1964, this prime minister in America, he created this scheme. What is it? That single women, they will be given special privileges. You see the people's qualification, it created an impetus for people to break the social structure. If I get money by being single, why should I take to the path of marriage? When a farmer receives grain from the government, when the farmer takes facilities from the government, one of the biggest scam, if you study carefully, it's a very tricky topic, but it's a very interesting topic. You see the earning of different kinds of farmers. At some point of time, they should be taxed if they are earning good money. Right. So what we have done, we have actually made a policies which are not pro poor, they are pro poverty. We have removed the inspiration from people to become entrepreneurs. As I said, this is what Lakshmi is telling. If we get rice from the government, if we get sugar from the government, you naturally become satisfied. Arey kaam kyun karne ka? Why should I work? There is a television to watch, there is a liquor to drink, there is a grain given by the government. Why should I work? So this is what Lakshmi is saying. The satisfied people will not contribute anything. And therefore even the avatars, even the avatara tattva in India, what do? When they come down to this world, they do not perform simply heroic activities. They tell the devatas also, you come join me. Every monkey, vanaras, every soldier on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, every barber, every dhobi, every kambar, every blacksmith, everybody was involved in contributing in such a way. Only the soldiers fought war, but others were not directly involved in the war, but they were contributing. There were no spectators. But now we have become country of the spectators. And the same is applied in the spiritual realm also. Guru will take care of my advancement. I have to just surrender unto him. He will take everything. We have made the spiritual master Bahubali. We have made Krishna Bahubali. But very Krishna, what does he do? He engages Abhimanyu also, 16-year-old. He also has to take part. And even Draupadi has to take part by allowing her children to be part of this battle, willing to lose everything. So therefore, when you study carefully, there are so many myths in regards to what is reality, what is hero, what is wealth, what is prosperity. Just see, the people were sitting to formulate the constitution, and many of them had so many wrong assumptions about many things. And one more, we will conclude with this one. It is a vegetarianism and farmland. What is it? In the Vedic scripture, now this is very important. Those who are vegetarians don't have to fight with non-vegetarians, and those who are non-vegetarians don't need to teach people, are there in the scripture, it is there, this person happened, that person happened. Again the same thing. People pick and choose what favors them and reject what does not favor them. India had the capacity to reconcile between the vegetarians and non-vegetarians. The great Bharat Rishi, I will give you quote and then I will quote Manu Samhita. The great Bharat Rishi, when the Bharata's army was coming to Chitrakoot, right, they were coming to Chitrakoot to bring back Lord Ramachandra to Ayodhya so that he can be the king. When they came to Bharadraj Muni's ashram, who is Bharadraj Rishi? He is a disciple of Valmiki Maharshi. He was the one who actually learned all the 24,000 verses of Ramayana. Then it was taught to Lavakusha. Read the description of the food arrangement he made to the soldiers of Ram. There was a vegetarian dish and there was a non-vegetarian dish. What did he do? He allowed the soldiers, those who were eating, they served them rabbit meat, they served them peacock meat, they served them deer meat. It is therein, and Valmiki Maharshi is writing, who was a tapasvi. Lord Ram, people say Lord Ram also ate meat. Read in the Valmiki Ramayana, 14 years when he was in the forest, some of the Vaishnavas, unfortunately, while writing in the English book, they talk about Ram eating the flesh, but they don't read in the very Valmiki Ramayana. Valmiki Maharshi writes very clearly, Lord Ram had taken a vow of not eating cooked food. Then you can play another role. He ate raw fish, flesh, roots and nuts and dry fruit, not dry fruit, badam, pista, dried fruits, berries which were dried, they were eating that. And following in the footsteps of Lord Ramachandra, Bharat back in Ayodhya was eating barley soaked in cow urine. He wanted to do better perform tapasya than his brothers who were doing in the forest of Chitrakoot and Dandakaranya. So what did Bharadraja Rishi do? He served them. Read the Valmiki Ramayana. Not everybody was a meat eater. There was harmony between the both. And this is one of the most amazing. What does it say? Residue of meat oblation cast in the fire in a religious sacrifice, as well as that offered in a Shraddha repast, may be eaten, flesh may be eaten at the request of a Brahmana, and in disease or under circumstances which imperil life. So what does Manu say? You can eat. And what the non-vegetarians do? They play with the shlokas, like this many shlokas. Oh, idhar lakha hua hai. And they fight for picking and choosing, picking and choosing. See, now this is very risky shlokas. whatever exists in the world, all that Prajapati has obtained, ordained to be the food of living beings, all both mobile and immobile, is the food of creatures. The same principle the Christian use, that God made this creation and everything what moves is meant for human being. Or Manu is also saying. But it doesn't stop there, the verses continue. The immobile are the food of the mobile. The toothless ones are the food of the toothed creature. The handless are that of the hand possessed ones, and that the timid, that of the brave. Survival of the fittest is speaking about, and that is the truth also, we discussed that. An eater eating an animal and thinking it to be his legitimate food does not commit any sin, inasmuch as the ordiner has created such animals as eaters and the others as their food. Do you hear this carefully, all the vegetarians? And then he says, otherwise that in the times of distress, a Brahmana who eats the flesh of an animal in a manner condemned by the regulation is eaten defenseless by that animal in that next world. A huntsman who kills animals for money does not acquire the same demerit in afterlife. One who eats flesh in a violation of the ordinance. Let us go straight now to the last part. What does he say? Then he talks about Shraddha, then he comes here. Last few shlokas. It's a evolving concept. Please understand, it's an evolving concept. You may begin by this, but eventually as you grow higher and higher and higher and higher. We were in Sri Lanka recently, just before that attack happened. And in our bus there was a very nice Buddhist guide. He became very close to us, he was talking. At one point of time when he became very close, we wanted to have a nice conversation with him. Then I asked one of the devotees, I said, asked very mildly. I said, hey, you are Buddhist, right? Buddha taught non-violence. But why the Buddhists eat meat? And then because he gave, you know what, when we go for begging, our monks, when they go for begging, they should not put the people in confusion. Whatever they give, they should eat. Right? In their ashrams also sometimes they cook meat. Dalai Lama, all glories to him. We read his website. It is very clearly mentioned when Dalai Lama travels outside of Dharmashala, he eats flesh. When he comes back to ashram, he does not eat flesh. So it's very interesting. So the Shastras do speak. Should we condemn them because they are meat eating? The Shastras don't condemn. That should not become an issue for condemning people. Help them to evolve slowly, slowly, slowly. And where does Manu conclude? And then this Sri Lankan person said, you know what, eventually I have to give up. I know this is not correct. This does not make any sense. He said that. So therefore what does Manu say? Flesh cannot be obtained without killing a beast. Animal killing does not lead to heaven. Hence a man must forswear eating flesh. Concludes here, considering the origin of flesh, which is kind of transformed menstrual blood, and the pangs of the death and the incarceration the beast suffers, he must forever eating all kind of flesh, whether approved of or prohibited by the ordinance. But don't condemn people just because they are meat eaters. They may eat meat, but we eat them up by our harsh words. Right? So therefore, the concept of vegetarianism was a fascination for the Western world. An ordinary, in fact, I saw one video which was made in whenever the whole thing of video came. Just Google Bombay in 1920 or 1910. This British person, he is speaking about the fishermen, like I was speaking about the shepherds. Right, the fishermen, he is talking, it is very interesting, he said, some of these fishermen, their job is to collect fish, but they are vegetarians, he is saying that. When I went to Mangalore, near Mangalore area, went to fisherman's colony to do a program, and I was amused to see the fisherman's colony had a Matsyavatara deity, and the people who were worshipping were also fishermen, and some of their members would not eat flesh. The shepherds, I talked about this, the shepherds who are dhangars, they said they eat once a year the goat's flesh as a prasad. And what did they see in that goat? They said, they are like Lakshmi to us. They are like, they give us the prosperity. How can we kill them? And just see, this book called as, Bloodless Revolution, what does it say? Polos views of Brahmins. Can you imagine? Some of these tourists, when they came to Kerala, the land of God's own country. Now, even the Hindus, without any shame, they display their arrogance in eating cow's flesh. But that very Kerala, if you read, because they don't read the true history, when the people came from outside world, even some of the Christian priests, they were so influenced by vegetarianism because they provided such a varieties of fresh food, and they were shocked to see that. They became vegetarianism also, they became vegetarians, right? And even the non-vegetarians, I can confess, we used to be non-vegetarians because born as the Kshatriyas in the coastal area, right? But the kind of, I can say we were vegetarians and we were non-vegetarians. Vegetarians on Monday, vegetarians on Thursday, vegetarians on Thursday, vegetarians on Saturday. You can't touch it. And entire Shravan Mas, 1 month, you cannot eat it. Once a month, max flesh, right? So, even the flesh eaters had some regulation. Now there are people, the Tripatis unfortunately, the Mishras unfortunately, the Pandys unfortunately, the Sharmas unfortunately, what do? It is not just once a while. It is like pouncing upon it 365 days, 24 hours in the middle of the night also. And they claim to be very highly educated, sophisticated people, right? Without reading the history. In fact, even Mahatma Gandhi, when he came to London, you read, he confessed himself that why the hell am I a vegetarian? Because I am a misfit here. But fortunately he came in contact with the vegetarian society. And he said, wow. And who are this vegetarian society? How they were inspired by? They were inspired by Indian thought only. So if those who are interested more in learning, there is a book written, very interesting presentation called as Bloodless Revolution. And he mentions there, exceedingly virtuous, scrupulously honest, bathed regularly unlike Europeans, writes it is not my words, lived extraordinarily long and healthy lives, would not eat or kill any creature or any living things in the world, because they said that they have souls. This is from the Bloodless Revolution, that this clear understanding that even the animals have souls. You know what? We talk about liberty, fraternity, and this lady went and spoke in UN assembly. That very country, America, we respect America, they are India's friend, but originally till many years the women were not given the voting right. When Bill Clinton was contesting, Hillary Clinton was contesting for election, I spoke to some of the Americans. They said there is no question she will win because she is a woman. America has not selected women up until now. We had Kittur Chani Rannamma. In Arjuna had to fight a battle with Prabhavati. We discussed that in the Jaimini Bharat. Kaikeyi knew how to ride the horses. When Satyabhama went with Krishna, she was Krishna's chariot driver. There are so many great women in the Vedic time. They were having a conversation with Janak Maharaj. Jhansi Rani was riding on the horse. She was made a queen, ruling it. Fought the war. Ahalyabai Holkar, not one. So many like that. But there was no voting right also. One of the great priest in the Christian world, what did they say? Animals don't have soul. And even women don't have soul till the 16th or 17th century. Here even a mice. Kan kan mein Bhagwan sword leave the Atma kan because Yumam pashyati sarvatra sarvam cha mai pashyati. This is the vision has been given by our scripture. So how much responsible we should be, right? Again, when they came, some of them incorporating vegetarian Buddhism into biblical tradition, he claimed the skins worn by Adam and Eve were actually coconut fiber clothes. This person, when he came to Kerala and Sri Lanka, and therefore he saw the Eden garden must have been here only. Considered the vegetarian Buddhist and Brahmins of India continued the pre-Lasperian vegetable diet. He thought like that. Abandoning his initial caution, discarded his European clothes and donned a coconut fiber sarong. One Christian priest who had come to Kerala joined the Buddhist fraternity till he returned back. Ended up using vegetarianism as a bridge between his religion and Buddhism, who had actually set out to check upon the progress of the Eastern Catholic mission. Right, one. And then therefore he said, spiritually and mental more quick and nimble, vegetarianism clearly made the Indian just as healthy. Animal protection made them uniquely standing out with the principles of justice and tenderness to all animals and all living creatures. This was enjoined as a common duty of a humanity. This is all written by a Christian person. Many like that. I have just taken few. He compared them to be the original inhabitants of the world, for whom not have been carnivorous, not to have tasted flesh, but only to have fed up upon fruits and greens. As none of these customs were mandatory as the rules and regulation of their religion, instead they harmonize very well and highly contribute to the health and pleasure of their lives. So therefore, why was it? It was but natural, because there was plenty vegetable, fruits, rice. India grew 21,000 varieties of food, rice. And just see the cultivable land in India. United States stands first. How many hectares? 174 million hectares. India has got 159 hectares. Russia is much bigger than in India. China is much bigger than India. Russia has 121 million hectares. China has 103 hectares. Cultivable land. Another interesting point is, India can take crops more than 2 times. America cannot do that. So therefore, this is the soil. मेरी देश की धरती सोना उगले उगले हीरे मोती मेरी देश की धरती, right? We grew up this. We grew up listening to this song. And when Savarkarji was on the other side of the ocean, he sang that famous song. Sagara prana talamalila. Sagara prana talamalila. Right? Why? Why this soil? Why this water? Why this air? Why its fire? Why its space is so important? No? So therefore, I remember one very senior spiritualist, he was telling me, he said, when you come, you should touch the land, touch the dust of this land. And he was an American teacher, right? So therefore, when we focus and invest where we are supposed to invest and focus, give charity where you are supposed to give charity, at the right place, योग्य लोगों के लिए, empower people, then what happens? Then we become responsible. We are the one who become Bhagya Vidhata, because the spirit is there. The Lord is sitting in our heart as Paramatma. He has given us the scripture, He has given us the understanding. Therefore, this COVID-19 is an eye opener. And I didn't hear the talk, but I've heard from people what the Prime Minister said about. What did he speak about? Essence is talked about, Atmanirbharata, Swavalambi. The concept of Swarajya. Swarajya means what? Self-rule. What is that self-rule? Self-rule means I need to rule my own self. I need to be self-sufficient so that I can contribute. So therefore, our system is not independent living. Our system is not dependent living. The Bharatiya system, it does not talk about independence. Independence is arrogance. Dependence is slavery. But interdependence is the substance of Bharatiyata. Therefore, you can be doing everything to the contribution. In our Radha Gopinath temple, we had started this whole concept of Ganga, Yamuna and Jamuna. Ganga, Yamuna and Saraswati. Education, village development and health. Right. So, the same concept can be understood by people. And some of our devotee friends are connected to develop proper alternative education system. And we have one of our very close friend in IIT Mumbai, narratives, proper narratives. Education is not only meant for children. Yes, there has to be education for the children also, but education has to be given to somebody 75-year-old also. The great economists sitting in Delhi, never studied India, they also need to understand, so that in their next lifetime, at least they come and do not cause trouble to this process. So therefore, visit Bharat regularly if you are not in this country, in this part of the world. Continue to remain Bharatiya. From Annamaya to Anandmaya, when we grow individually and develop society through education, we can grow again beyond the boundaries to contribute and not to conquer. India did not conquer not because they did not had the courage or the power, but they did not find any need to do that. By service, serve with devotion under the guidance of our teachers, gurus and acharyas. And therefore, there are many activities, Ganga, Jamuna, Saraswati, which our temple, Radha Gopinath temple does. And there are, as I said, we have friends working on many aspects. There is a project which they are running called as Dharma Wiki, where the Dharma Wiki is run in IIT by some of the professors, under their guidance, which is not directly connected. The whole concept is to give proper knowledge in the Wikipedia in regards to many yagya, somarasa, in regards to all the reference. Unfortunately, if you want to study about somarasa, the reference will not be of Shankaracharya. A reference will not be necessary of Madhvacharya. A reference will not be from the Niruktas. The reference will come from Griffith. The reference will come from Max Muller, and you try to edit them. No, they have their own policies. So therefore, these scholars, they came together and they started this concept of Dharma Wiki, so that traditional scholars who are rooted in the Shastras, not necessarily connected to any organization, but helping the organization to represent properly, give that knowledge. They are doing amazing work, and they are also having lot of this great revolution is happening in regards to transforming education from Anna to Ananda. There are many such works are happening. Within the institutional setup and beyond the institutional setup also. And that is what the ISKCON's founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada eventually had desired. What is that? Varnasrama system. The Varnashram system has a core consideration of place to function. Bharata, the sthanam is required. When you have a right place to function, establishing Varnashram system where true kinds of education, where true kind of empowerment, a true kind of farming, understanding your land, understanding your water, understanding your roots, when that happens, then you naturally see that divinity. If you are a Vaishnava, you will see Krishna everywhere, Ram everywhere. You are Shivite, you will see Shiva Lord everywhere. You practice Brahman realization, you see that energy flooding everywhere. And therefore, this Bharat Bhumi, as I said, we want to grow beyond the boundaries, not to conquer, but to contribute. And that was the message given by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Also, what was that message? Bharat Bhumite hoila manushya janma sartaka karo paropkar. He did not say make your life perfect and conquer others. So therefore, the purpose of this presentation was not to feel proud. The purpose of this presentation was not to feel that we are chosen people. The purpose of presentation was not to feel that we are so great. The purpose of this presentation is to feel that we have a tradition, we have a roots. It is connected to deep value system, to become responsible, to be the contributor, to work, to cooperate, help ourselves grow and help others grow, so that the entire world, as our Rishi said, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, the every part of the world becomes a place, a family. And that's what symbolically Srila Prabhupada also mentioned, that what is it? His society is the home where everybody can live. And where does this spirit come from? The spirit comes from that very concept of Bharata. We bow down to this Bharat Bhumi. Every time when you come down, in your heart, when you touch this ground, it is not simply a soil. It is an extension of Mother Bhumi. It is an extension of Mother Sita. It is an extension of Lakshmi, because all the energy in Sanatan Dharma is considered as extension of the Ladini potency, the Durga Shakti, the Sita Shakti, the Lakshmi Shakti, the Radharani Shakti. Therefore, we are fortunate and we want to be responsible to contribute and to grow in our life and help others also to grow. Thank you very much for giving this chance last 5 days, to hear about this interesting subject of Bharat Bhagya Vidhata. And as I said, based on the same topic, those who are expert, as I said, we are also planning harmonizing traditionalism and modernity. Similarly, two young girls who have been part of this regular world, also rooted in their Vedic ideas. They want to present, because many people feel very embarrassed about this subject, but this subject has caused so much of controversy, divided the society. The liberals attacking, regressive culture. And other day, one boy, just now I do Gita class, he was telling me, in their school in Bombay, they were talking about, and written by our own Hindu children only, saying that how the whole concept of menstruation in Hinduism is very regressing, very abhorring, without even studying anything. So therefore, these two girls, have decided to present this courageously on 23rd and 24th. Anybody can listen, men, women, and in between also, right? So you are welcome, and we can do this and we will take few questions. Here is one question, I will take this, then from the from our this thing also. I had question on the education system in the current scenario with middle class people like us can do. How can we contribute to change? My daughter is still 5-year-old. I am not in favor of homeschooling. Please advise. Wherever you begin, see another very interesting principle that many times we act helplessly. We play victim card. Oh, it's not for me. It's not for you, but for your children. Wherever you are, it doesn't matter whether you are in Pakistan also, whether you are in Bangladesh also, whether you are in America also. You can add something alternative in their life. Slowly, slowly. It could be 5%, it could be 7%, it could be 8%. There is one professor in America, Manjul Bhargav. He is a mathematician. Very interesting story. He grew up in America, but every vacation he would come to India, stay with his grandparents. They gave him the culture. They taught him tabla. Now uses tabla and teaches in one of the universities in Princeton or one of the universities mathematics. Very interesting. You can Google Manjul Bhargav and understand. So therefore, nobody should feel because I am poor, therefore I can't do this. Anybody, for whatever, however old and however young they are, we can begin somewhere. Do not try to be artificially revolutionary suddenly. Take baby step and grow and contribute. And I know so many families, so many people are trying to inculcate those education system. Poor, rich, middle, doesn't matter. No, add something alternative for their life, because now unfortunately as they grow, they may become big doctors, they may become big engineers, they may become big MBAs, they may get big money, but the problem is they might become narcissist. They may have the mental imbalance. There is a big degree but not able to function. Do you want functioning children, functioning people with stability in life? Right, we know a lot of people at the age of 35, 40 they realize. So what they do, they continue to work what they are doing, at the same time also explore what their passion is. When they harmonize between the two, slowly, many passion becomes their profession also. It has to be done very systematically, slow steps. Begin by being Vaman Dev's principle, dhire dhire dhire, and eventually you could grow in such a way that it can contribute to the growth of everybody. Any other question? I think they did not hear. I was just spoke about so much on Dronacharya did give education to Karna. I mentioned that. Please read this book on Karna on trial also. That Dronacharya was guru of Karna. It is in so many parts of the Mahabharata it is spoken. So there is no question of he did not learn from Dronacharya. He did not get Brahmastra as much as Dronacharya's son was not supposed to receive. That was the time he went to our Parshuramji and lied there that he was a Brahmana. Eklavya, why was he not taught? Dronacharya was not a guru in the sense of having no discrimination. He had a very clear purpose. He wanted to teach the Kurus. Because he wanted to teach the Kurus and those who are connected to Kurus, because he wanted to make his army to beat his friend who had become his enemy. And Eklavya, being not part of the that family, he said, I can't teach you. That is one thing. And again I have written this whole story in this book called as Real Side. Was it there that Ekalavya was Shudra, therefore he was not taught? Our what's his name, Ram's friend Guha was from the same community like Ekalavya. Our Shabri was not from the fourth order, she was beyond the fourth order, and Ram went to her house. Dharmavya, the butcher, taught a Brahmana Kaushika, Tulabhar, the shopkeeper also gave knowledge. A Chandala and Vishwamitra Muni's discussion is there, read in the Mahabharata. So therefore Ekalavya not learning from Dronacharya had nothing to do with caste, it had to do with political reality of he not being part of the Kuru dynasty. We will stop here, and please be connected to that seminar. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
RG Media YouTube channel. Like, share, subscribe.